when we hear about ancient Egypt. The name alone evokes images of grand pyramids, divine pharaohs, and a timeless civilization stretching back into the mists of antiquity. Not just Africa's most popular ancient culture, Egypt is one of the most globally recognized civilizations in human history. But what if we told you Egypt wasn't the first? That long before the pharaohs, before the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, there existed another African state, one older and perhaps even more powerful. A civilization whose name is rarely mentioned in mainstream history books. Ta-seti, located in what we today call Nubia. Why, then, has Egypt dominated the narrative of African antiquity? And how did Ta-seti, despite its seniority and influence, fade into historical obscurity? This is a story of power, population, geography, culture, and the myths we tell to make sense of our place in the world. Welcome back to another video exploring African history, culture, and worldview. If you value this kind of content, please like and subscribe. The Nile River is the lifeblood of northeastern Africa. Stretching over 6,600 kilometers, it nourishes lands from Uganda to Egypt. Along its banks, some of the world's earliest states emerged. And when we speak of Nile Valley civilizations, two regions stand out: Egypt in the north and Nubia in the south. Scholar Christopher Ehret notes that Egypt and Nubia were the first significant states in all of Africa. Their emergence wasn't random. It was rooted in geography and demography. The Nile Valley, particularly in Upper Egypt and northern Nubia, provided fertile land and access to trade networks that attracted early African communities. Over time, dense populations formed, and with that, so did the seeds of organized statehood. But here's the twist. Contrary to popular belief, Egyptian civilization did not come first. Archaeological and historical evidence points to the existence of an older state, Ta-seti in northern Nubia, what is today southern Egypt and northern Sudan. Ta-seti, meaning land of the bow, is believed to have flourished between 3400 and 3200 BCE. That's before Egypt's first dynasty, before Narmer, and before the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. According to the tomb inscriptions and grave goods found in Qustul and other Nubian sites, the rulers of Ta-seti possessed symbols of divine kingship: crowns, palaces, and tombs predating Egyptian equivalents. The powerful state of Qustul, possibly the center of Ta-seti, boasted royal iconography that some scholars argue influenced early Egyptian pharaonic culture. Imported items from the Levant, Assyria, Canaan, and Palestine have been found in these Nubian graves, showing the far-reaching trade and cultural connections of the Ta-seti elite. Historian Laszlo Török and others suggest that Ta-seti may have exerted control over Upper Egypt before Egypt itself was unified. In fact, early Egyptian dynasties may have inherited or appropriated key elements of Nubian kingship, from divine authority to mortuary practices. So, if Ta-seti came first, what happened? Why did Egypt rise while Nubia faded from the global imagination? Christopher Ehret offers one foundational answer: population density. The Nile in Upper Egypt is wider and more agriculturally rich than the narrower Nubian stretch. That meant more reliable food sources, more settlements, and eventually more centralized power. Upper Egypt could support larger, denser populations than Nubia. This gave it the manpower and social complexity needed to form a unified state faster. Nubia, in contrast, was composed of smaller, more dispersed and diverse communities, many of which were semi-nomadic and relied not just on agriculture but also stock raising and trade. This demographic layout made centralized control more difficult. While Ta-seti may have had advanced culture and political influence early on, its population base couldn't match the sheer scale of Upper Egypt. Another factor was cultural and linguistic diversity. Nubia, or what Greco-Roman sources often called Ethiopia, was home to many ethnic groups with varied traditions, dialects, and modes of life. From pastoral nomads to settled farmers, the region was a mosaic of African identities. This diversity dilemma made it difficult for one polity, like Ta-seti, to unify or maintain long-term control over the entire Nubian corridor. As one Egyptian scholar observed, independent communities in Nubia were more mobile, more spaced out, and less reliant on agriculture than their northern neighbors. This decentralization made statecraft harder. Upper Egypt, while not free of diversity, had greater agricultural stability, and thus, a more unified cultural and political foundation. That foundation allowed it to eventually establish the first true Egyptian dynasty around 3100 BCE. But statehood isn't just about food or population. It's also about ideas. In his book, Sapiens, historian Yuval Noah Harari introduces the concept of the imaginative order. Early humans lived in small bands. But to cooperate in larger societies, they needed to create shared fictions. Myths, religions, hierarchies, laws. These imaginative orders allowed humans to cooperate at scale. This is precisely what ancient Egypt achieved. The pharaoh wasn't just a ruler, he was a god-king, a divine figure tasked with maintaining Ma'at, the cosmic order. This ideology unified Egypt's people and legitimated its ruling class. According to Laszlo Török, this myth of state was so powerful that even centuries later, when the Kushites in Nubia rose to power during Egypt's 25th dynasty, they copied Egyptian royal titles, religious practices, and symbols to bolster their own legitimacy. In other words, Egypt's imaginative order was more convincing, more scalable, and more exportable than anything Ta-seti had developed. And once Egypt developed writing, hieroglyphics, it had the ultimate tool to record and reinforce its myth of state. Writing helped preserve Egypt's story and erase or marginalize competing ones. Ironically, Nubia, once a regional power, would later be seen only through the lens of Egyptian conquest. While mainstream narratives often describe Egypt invading Nubia, they rarely acknowledge the reverse, that early Nubian rulers may have once ruled parts of Upper Egypt. Ta-seti and early Nubian culture became footnotes, not foundations. But history is rarely so simple. Later Nubian kingdoms like Kush and Meroe would re-emerge as major powers. The 25th dynasty of Egypt, known as the Kushite dynasty, was led by Nubians who claimed the pharaonic legacy for themselves. Their use of Egyptian mythology and statecraft is proof of Egypt's enduring imaginative order, but also a testament to Nubia's resilience. Perhaps, with greater archaeological work and more decolonized scholarship, we will continue to rediscover the lost legacy of Ta-seti and the Southern Nile. So why did Egypt rise while Nubia faded? The answers lie in geography, demographics, political mythology, and the power of the imaginative order. Egypt had the right conditions to build a centralized state, and the ideological tools to preserve its legacy. But that should not blind us to what came before. Ta-seti deserves recognition not as Egypt's southern neighbor, but as a pioneer of African civilization. Its story reminds us that history is not a single narrative, but a tapestry of forgotten truths and erased voices. If you believe in honoring these voices, if you want to see more content exploring African history from a decolonized Pan-African perspective,